It was a typical morning on a quiet suburban street, the kind where nothing out of the ordinary ever really happens. But today, things were about to take an unexpected turn. As the sun slowly rose, casting golden rays over the rows of neatly trimmed lawns and calm homes, a girl burst out of her house, running with all her might. Her face was streaked with tears, her chest heaving as if she couldn't catch her breath. She wasn't just running, she was escaping. But from what? Or, perhaps more disturbingly, from whom? In the distance, the sound of a garbage truck grew louder, signaling the arrival of the neighborhood's unsung hero, the garbage man. He had seen it all in his years of working this same route, the regular faces, the families, the routines. But today, something felt different. He noticed the girl, and she didn't just pass by as usual. She was frantic, her eyes wide with panic. Without hesitation, she sprinted straight to him, her hands shaking as she approached. The garbage man had never been a stranger to people in distress, but there was something in her desperation that made him stop what he was doing. He dropped the bag in his hand and knelt down to her. Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. The girl couldn't answer at first. She gasped for air, her body trembling as if she had just run a marathon. But when she finally managed to speak, her voice cracked with fear. "You have to help me. Please, they're coming." The garbage man's heart began to race. Who was coming? What was going on? Before he could ask, the unmistakable sound of sirens wailed down the street, cutting through the air with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. In an instant, he turned, looking down the road to see police cars screeching to a halt. The flashing lights reflected off every surface, casting an eerie glow on the street as officers rushed out of their cars. This wasn't a regular day. The calm neighborhood was being swarmed by law enforcement, and it was all happening right before his eyes. But why? The girl, still shaking, tugged at the garbage man's sleeve. "Please," he whispered, "don't let them take me." Her words hung in the air like a silent threat. The garbage man was frozen, caught between his instincts to help and his own confusion. Who was chasing her? What could possibly be so dangerous that the police had to shut down the street? As the officers surrounded the area, blocking off the road with their cars, the tension in the air became unbearable. The girl's eyes flickered to the street, then back to the garbage man, pleading with him for something, anything, to stop the inevitable. But just before he could react, the police began asking questions. They were focused on her now, their eyes narrowed, their postures stiff. Something told him they already knew more than they were letting on, but the truth still eluded him. The garbage man found himself at the center of a storm he didn't understand. What had he just walked into? And why did the girl's desperate plea feel like a cry for more than just help? The officers moved in, their movements sharp and calculated. One of them approached the garbage man, his face grim. "We need to ask you a few questions," he said, his voice flat, his eyes scanning the area. The garbage man's mind raced, but his thoughts kept returning to the girl, her tear-streaked face haunting him as if there was something she wasn't saying. And then, in a heartbeat, the answer would come, but not yet. The sirens blared louder now, a constant reminder of the chaos erupting around them. The girl's voice echoed in his mind. Asterisk, they are coming. They're going to take me. Asterisk, but what was it that had driven her to this point? And how was the garbage man, of all people, tangled up in this web of mystery and fear? This was only the beginning of a story that no one saw coming. What would happen next would change everything. But for now, all anyone could do was wait in the tense silence that followed. What was the real story behind the girl's frantic escape? And why did the police arrive so quickly? Would the garbage man be able to help? Or was he now a part of something far larger and more dangerous than he ever imagined? And just as the situation reached its boiling point, an unexpected twist was about to unfold, one that would leave everyone wondering. Asterisk, who can you really trust when the world around you begins to unravel? Asterisk. Stay tuned, because what happens next will shock you. As the police officers continued to move in, the garbage man could feel the weight of their presence. The girl's terrified eyes locked onto his, pleading for him to do something, but he didn't know what to do. He wasn't equipped for this kind of situation. He wasn't a hero, just a guy who showed up early every morning to pick up the trash. But now, standing in the middle of a street swarming with cops, the stakes had suddenly changed. His thoughts drifted to the girl, her hasty escape from whatever danger had chased her out of her home. What could possibly be so urgent, so dangerous, that she had no choice but to run straight into the arms of a garbage man? Was it something personal? Or was she in danger from something bigger? His heart was pounding now, and as much as he wanted to help, he was caught in a whirlwind that seemed far beyond his control. A voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" It was one of the officers, and his tone was sharp, demanding. His eyes flicked back and forth between the garbage man and the girl, assessing the situation. The garbage man swallowed hard. He could feel the pressure mounting, and the longer he hesitated, the more anxious the officers seemed to get. The girl, still trembling, was struggling to stand upright. It was clear she was in distress, but she refused to speak. Was she trying to protect someone? Or was she just too terrified to trust anyone? The questions piled up in the garbage man's mind as the officer moved closer to the girl. "Do you know this girl?" the officer asked him directly. The garbage man hesitated, glancing at the girl. He didn't know her. He had seen her around, of course. She lived a few doors down, but he had never spoken to her. There was no reason for him to get involved. But something about this whole scene didn't sit right with him. Something felt off, like there was a story waiting to unfold, a story that might explain the terror that was evident in the girl's eyes. "No," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know her." The officer nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. "We need to find out what's going on here. You're not involved in this, are you?" The suspicion in the officer's voice was hard to ignore. The garbage man felt his chest tighten. Was the police department starting to think he was connected to whatever was happening? Before he could respond, the girl spoke in a shaky whisper. "I need to go. They'll hurt me if you don't help me." Her words were barely audible, but the fear in them was unmistakable. It was as if every instinct inside her was screaming at her to get away, to run. The garbage man's eyes darted between the officers and the girl, trying to process the severity of the situation. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The only sound was the faint hum of the garbage truck's engine, now idling at the end of the street. The officers exchanged glances, and the tension thickened in the air. What was it that had pushed this girl to the edge? What was she running from? The officers stepped closer to her, their voices low as they tried to coax information out of her. But the girl's only response was a panicked shake of her head. She wasn't talking. And then something even stranger happened. A black SUV turned down the street, its engine roaring as it sped toward the scene. The headlights cut through the misty morning, casting long shadows across the pavement. The officers immediately stiffened, their hands hovering over their holsters. The garbage man's stomach sank. He could feel the shift in the air. This was no longer just a routine disturbance. Something much bigger was unfolding, and he was stuck right in the middle of it. The SUV screeched to a halt in front of the police barricade. The doors flew open, and two men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't officers. They weren't even local. The way they moved, calm, collected, with an almost predatory grace, told the garbage man they were someone else entirely. Special agents, perhaps, or worse. The kind of people who didn't care about street signs or traffic laws. They cared only about their mission. One of the agents, a tall man with cold eyes, approached the officers. There was a brief exchange of words, too fast for the garbage man to catch. But he could tell that whatever was being said, it wasn't good. The officers stepped back, almost reluctantly, and allowed the agents to take control. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. The ordinary neighborhood street that had been so peaceful moments ago now felt like the center of a high-stakes operation. The girl's eyes widened in terror when she saw the men in suits. She backed away, her hands shaking as she turned to the garbage man. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please don't let them take me." But before he could respond, the agent spoke, his voice cold and detached. "It's too late for you, miss. We've been looking for you, and you won't get away this time." The words sent a chill down the garbage man's spine. Who were these people? What did they want with this girl? He had no answers, just a growing sense of unease that something far more dangerous was at play than he could ever have imagined. With a swift motion, the agent grabbed the girl's arm, pulling her toward the SUV. The garbage man stood frozen, his thoughts racing. He didn't know if he could stop them. He didn't know what was going on, or why this was happening. But there was no time left to think. The girl's scream cut through the air, piercing the silence of the street. "Help me," she cried. "Help me, please." The garbage man's heart raced. Was he really going to just stand by and do nothing? Was this how it ended? But before he could make a decision, the officer stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Don't get involved," the officer warned, his voice low and firm. "This is bigger than you think." But the garbage man didn't hear him. His focus was entirely on the girl, whose desperate eyes were now locked with his. And in that moment, he knew he couldn't just let her go, not without trying. But what could one man do? What was he really up against? The agent's grip on the girl tightened as she was shoved into the SUV, the doors slamming shut behind her. The garbage man didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The storm that was about to hit would turn everything upside down, leaving him with questions that had no answers. And the truth, when it came, would be far darker than anyone could have imagined. The garbage man stood there, rooted to the spot, watching the black SUV drive away, its tires kicking up gravel as it sped down the street. The girl's face was pressed against the tinted window, her eyes wide with fear, her mouth moving as if she were still screaming, but no sound reached him. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. He had done nothing. He had been powerless. But deep down, something told him this wasn't over, not by a long shot. He glanced over at the police officers, still standing nearby, their faces grim as they exchanged words with the two men in dark suits. The agents seemed unfazed by the scene they had just created, as though this was just another day at the office for them. The officers were still keeping their distance, looking at the garbage man with a mix of suspicion and wariness. No one seemed to have any real answers. Everyone was just watching and waiting. Without thinking, the garbage man turned and began walking in the direction the SUV had gone. He didn't know what he was going to do or how he could help, but he had to find out what had happened to that girl. She had been in trouble, and he had seen the fear in her eyes. He couldn't just let it go, not now. As he walked, his thoughts raced. Who were those men? What did they want with her? And why had the police backed off so easily, letting them take control? It didn't make sense. There was something about the whole situation that reeked of corruption and secrecy, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. The street seemed emptier now, quieter. He was alone, his footsteps echoing in the silence. His mind kept returning to the girl. The moment when she had looked at him, pleading for help, was burned into his memory. He had to know why she was so terrified. There was a story there, one that could explain everything. But would he ever find out the truth? He turned the corner at the end of the block and nearly collided with a figure standing in the shadows. The man was tall, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, his face obscured by a baseball cap. He stepped back, as if surprised by the encounter, but then his eyes locked onto the garbage man, sharp and knowing. "You're not going to give up, are you?" the man said, his voice low. The garbage man frowned, confused. "Who are you?" The stranger glanced over his shoulder, checking to make sure no one was watching, then nodded for the garbage man to follow him. "Come with me. There's something you need to know." They moved quickly, ducking into an alleyway just off the main street. The man seemed to know exactly where he was going, and the garbage man followed, his curiosity and concern for the girl pushing him forward. They reached a small, inconspicuous door in the side of a building. The man knocked twice, then 3 times before the door opened slightly. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and the air felt thick, as though secrets had been brewing here for a long time. The stranger motioned for him to come in. "This isn't just some random girl you saw," the man began, his voice serious now. "She's part of something much bigger, something dangerous." The garbage man's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The stranger hesitated, his eyes scanning the room. "You've been caught up in a covert operation, a shadow organization. The police? They're not just police, they're involved. The people who took her, they work for a company with far-reaching influence. They don't play by the rules. The garbage man was stunned. This couldn't be real, but the tension in the air told him it was. But why her? What do they want with her? Her father, the man said, his voice lowering to a whisper. He's been digging into some things that these people want to keep buried. She's caught in the middle of it all. She's being used to send a message. And now, they've got her. The weight of the words hung in the air. The garbage man could feel the pieces of the puzzle slowly starting to click into place. But it wasn't enough. He had to know more. You said she's not alone. Who else is involved? He asked, his voice sharp with urgency. The stranger looked at him, a sad expression crossing his face. The girl's family. Her father has been tracking a powerful group of individuals for years. He uncovered evidence that could bring them down, but they know he's close. They know he's been getting too close, and they're desperate to stop him. The girl's life is the leverage they need. The garbage man felt sick to his stomach. The girl wasn't just some innocent bystander caught up in a random incident. She was a pawn in a dangerous game, and her father had risked everything to uncover the truth. He turned to the stranger, a new sense of determination in his eyes. What can I do? How do I help her? The man hesitated for a moment before answering. There's a way. You can't stop them alone, but you can warn her father. Let him know what's happening. If he can make contact with the right people, maybe there's a chance to turn this around. The garbage man nodded, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He couldn't undo the events that had already taken place, but he could still make a difference. He had to. As he left the building and stepped back into the quiet street, he could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. The girl, the agents, the police. It was all connected in ways he couldn't have imagined. He was no longer just a garbage man. He had become a part of something far bigger, and the stakes were higher than ever before. He had one chance to get this right. The night had fallen, but the garbage man's path was clear. He had a mission now, to find the girl's father, to deliver the warning, and to uncover the truth that had been buried for so long. As the stars twinkled overhead, he knew that this story wasn't over. It had only just begun, and the resolution, when it came, would be one the world would never forget.